Seieu. Sigueu tots benvinguts a aquest acte acadèmic d'investidura de la senyora Margaret Hamilton com a doctora honoris causa per la Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya. Una cordial salutació també a aquells que esteu seguint aquest acte a través del canal UPC Televisió. M'acompanya a la taula la secretària general de la UPC, la senyora Marta de Blas, i el vicerector de Política Científica de la UPC, el professor Gabriel Bujeda. La professora Núria Castell serà la padrina de la nova doctora honoris causa. Tinc el plaer d'obrir la sessió. La secretària general de la Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya, la senyora Marta de Blas, llegirà l'acte de nomenament de la senyora Margaret Hamilton com a doctora honoris causa d'aquesta universitat.
Com a secretària general, certifico que el 23 de maig de 2017 el Consell de Govern de la i amb els vots unànimes de tots els membres del Consell de Govern. Avui, 18 d'octubre de 2018, en aquesta cerimònia solemne que ens aplega, el rector de la UPC, Francesc Torres, que en farà la investidura, la padrina Núria Castell, que en farà la lloa, els doctors i doctores que formen la comitiva i tota la comunitat universitària, celebrem l'acte d'investidura com a doctora honoris causa de Margaret Hamilton, acte amb el qual tenim l'honor que s'incorpori com a membre de la nostra universitat. Margaret Hamilton, científica computacional, matemàtica i enginyera de sistemes, forma part de la història de la ciència, una història universal, i alhora està inserida en la nostra memòria col·lectiva, no solament en tant que comunitat científica i acadèmica, sinó també com a ciutadans i ciutadanes. I això és així per la seva participació en projectes que han marcat nous rumbs, han obert nous camins i han ampliat, sense que això sigui una mera metàfora, els límits del nostre món. Els límits del nostre món físic, amb la seva contribució en els projectes Apolo, que han fet que tots nosaltres, a través d'aquells astronautes, puguem dir que hem trepitjat la Lluna. També els límits dels nostres models conceptuals, amb l'ús pioner del terme enginyeria del software i el desenvolupament teòric i aplicat que se'n deriva. També els límits dels nostres models vitals, amb el seu exemple precursor de dona que va treballar en un món totalment masculí i que ha impulsat la presència de les dones en el món de la informàtica. Per tot això, és un honor i un plaer celebrar aquest acte d'investidura. It's an honor and a pleasure to be witness to this award and to be able to personally congratulate Margaret Hamilton.
Prego el professor Gabriel Bujeda, vicerector de Política Científica de la Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya, que vagi a buscar a la senyora Margaret Hamilton. Prego a la padrina, la professora Núria Castell, que faci la laudatio dels mèrits de la senyora Margaret Hamilton.
Distinguished Rector of the Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya, distinguished members of the University Senate and Board of Trustees, authorities and representatives of institutions and companies, professors, students, administrative staff, family, friends, special thanks for the group of girls that we have in Barcelona Grad Core Workshop meeting today, and they are Margaret Hamilton. It is a great pleasure to be here today at this solemn ceremony to welcome to the University Senate a new doctor honoris causa of the UPC. Pursuant the Governing Council decision that was already read, sponsored by the Facultat Informàtica de Barcelona, of which I'm proud to have been the Dean. Margaret Hamilton nomination was supported by UPC departments and schools and several internationally well-known experts in software engineering and computing history. Margaret Hamilton has a long list of accomplishments. She's a computer scientist, a systems engineer, and a business owner and entrepreneur. She's also known as the woman who got men to the moon. During her long research and professional career, her research interests have included systems and software with a preventative paradigm, formal theory, ultra-reliable systems, error detection and recovery, modeling and programming languages, reusability, correctness by built-in language properties, machine interfaces, open architecture, seamless integration, operating system, automate life cycle environments, software development productivity, system design and software development within an asynchronous distributed system of systems environment, and software lifecycle management. Hamilton began working on several software projects at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology at Boston, learning by herself about systems and software. From there, she got a position at NASA and as lead developer for the Apollo onboard flight software. During the early days of Apollo, she realized that software was not taken as seriously as other engineering disciplines within and outside computing. Hamilton and her team create methods, standards, rules, and tools for developing the flight software. To give legitimacy to the process of building software, she came up with the idea of naming the discipline software engineering. The 2017-2018 academic year has been a very special year for the FIP. It was the celebration of its 40th anniversary. Since 1977, our school offers top quality university education and excellence in the area of computing engineering that responds to the needs of the social and economic environment. Software engineering and programming with high quality criteria are basic elements of education at the FIP and constitute the working domain of several UPC research groups. Because of this, we sponsored this candidature, and today we are proud to welcome Ms. Margaret Hamilton, a pioneer in computer science history, to the UPC Senate. Furthermore, the software engineering community celebrates the 50th anniversary of the discipline this year. Around the world, several institutions and conferences commemorate this fact. The present award ceremony is our recognition of Ms. Hamilton's contribution to this discipline, the discipline which she named. In addition, next year, the world will commemorate the 50th anniversary of the first landing by man on the moon. The contributions of Ms. Hamilton and her team were crucial to Apollo 11's successful landing on the moon on 20 July of 1969. For that historical accomplishment, the UPC Aeronautics Schools, as well as the FIP, are proud to welcome her as a new University Senate member. Certainly, the accomplishments of Ms. Margaret Hamilton have been key in both areas, computing engineering and aeronautical engineering. Margaret Hamilton, born on 17 August 1936 in Paoli, in Indiana, studied mathematics at the University of Michigan in 1954, and subsequently earning a bachelor degree in mathematics with a minor in philosophy from Elmham College in 1958. She moved to Boston, Massachusetts, where her husband went to Brandeis for a master's degree in chemistry, followed by a law degree in Harvard Law School. During this time, Hamilton worked to support her family. Hamilton's plan was to pursue graduate study in abstract mathematics at Brandeis University, as soon as she and her husband took turns finishing their studies at their respective schools. She cites a female math professor as a mentor and major influence on her desire to continue in the study of abstract mathematics. She has other inspirations outside the technological world, including her father, philosopher and poet, and her grandfather, a school headmaster and Quaker minister. She says both her father and grandfather inspired her to minor in philosophy. To prepare for further studies in abstract math at Brandeis University, in 1959, she took an interim position at MIT to develop software for predicting weather on MIT's LGP30 computer, which she did in hexadecimal, and MIT's PDP-1 computer for Professor Edward Norton Lawrence in the meteorology department. Margaret Hamilton then developed software for the semi-automatic ground environment SAGE air defense system at the Lincoln laboratories. As soon as she heard MIT was looking for people to build software for sending man to the moon, she joined NASA MIT's project to build Apollo's onboard flight software for the manned missions. At that early time, computer science and software engineering were not yet disciplines. Instead, programmers had to learn on the job with hands-on experience. From 1961 to 1963, she worked on the same project at Lincoln Lab, where she was one of the programmers who wrote software for the first ANFSQ-7 computer to share for unfriendly aircrafts. She also wrote software for the Air Force Cambridge Research Laboratories. The SAGE project was an extension of the project Whirlwind, started by MIT to create a computer system that could predict weather systems and track their movements through simulators. SAGE was soon developed for military use in anti-aircraft air defense from potential Soviet attacks during the Cold War. It was her efforts on this project that made her a candidate for the position at NASA as the lead developer for the Apollo onboard flight software. Hamilton then joined the Charles Star Draper Laboratory at MIT, where she began by working on flight software for the Apollo unmanned space missions. Shortly thereafter, Hamilton was put in charge of the whole team that developed the Apollo onboard flight software for the manned missions and the subsequent Skylab missions. These include the software developed on the Apollo guidance computer for the command module, the lunar module, and the interfaces between and among all the missions phase. It also includes the system software, which was shared by and resided within both the CM and the LM modules. The system software includes the error detection and recovery software, such as the restarts and the priority displays, which Hamilton designed and developed. No software errors surfaced during actual flights. She worked to gain hands-on experience during a time when computer science courses were very rare and software engineering courses did not exist. The Apollo 11 mission was special. No human had ever landed on the moon before. Everything was going perfectly until something totally unexpected happened, precisely at the critical moment just before landing. Cunya en català. Si voleu veure el firmament, sabreu què va passar. 3 minutes before the lunar lander reaches the moon's surface, the Apollo guidance computer became overloaded. Program alarms indicate executive overflows, meaning the guidance computer could not complete all its tasks in real time and had to postpone some of them. However, thanks to the alarm and priority task systems developed by Hamilton's team, the situation was managed, and the priority displays gave the astronauts the choice to land or not to land. And they landed. The Apollo 11's crew became the first humans to walk on the moon, and Hamilton's team's software became the first software to run on the moon. Dr. Paul Curto, Senior Technology, who nominates Margaret Hamilton for a NASA Space Award, called Hamilton's work the foundation of ultra-reliable software design. Hamilton's software engineering group worked on several projects after Apollo. In 1976, Margaret Hamilton co-founded a company called Higher Order Software. She was the CEO from 1976 through 1984. Their aim was to further develop ideas over error prevention and fault tolerance emerging from her experience at MIT. They created a product called use.it, based on the higher order software methodology developed at MIT. It was successfully used in numerous government projects. One notable project was to formalize and implement the first computable IDIF, integration definition, the CIDIF for the Air Force, based on higher order software as its formal foundation. A detailed analysis of the host theory and the access language was used by Harold to develop a derived language for a more modern form of structured programming, derived from host, called the NOR programming language, from the viewpoint of these NOR subgoals. Harold goes on to show how host and his derived NOR programming language relate to mathematical logic, game theory, and artificial intelligence. Others have used host to formalize the semantics of linguistic quantifiers and to formalize the design of reliable real-time embedded systems. Margaret Hamilton left the company host in 1985, and at this time she continued her pursuit of error-free software. In March 1986, she became the founder and CEO of Hamilton Technologies, Inc. in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The company was developed around the Universal System Language, USL, and its associated automate environment, the 001 tool suite, based on her paradigm of development before the fact for system design and software development. HTI and its customers developed many applications using USL, this Universal System Language. Margaret Hamilton coined the term software engineering during her days working on the Apollo missions. In 50 years, this discipline has gained the same respect as any other engineering discipline. From the very beginning, as a pioneer software engineer, she was very concerned about possible errors and unexpected situations. She is still in the same concern for everything. During her long research and professional career, she has developed criteria, methodologies, language, and tools for ultra-reliable systems. She has published about 130 papers, proceedings, and reports about the 60 projects and 6 major programs in which she has been involved. Google engineers credit Margaret Hamilton as the first site reliability engineer. To mention some of the honors and awards already present to her, on 22nd November 2016, Margaret Hamilton was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by the United States President Barack Obama for her work leading the development of the onboard flight software from NASA's Apollo missions. This is the highest civilian honor in the United States. In 1986, she received the Ada Lovelace Award by the Association for Women in Computing. In 2003, she was given the NASA Exceptional Space Award for scientific and technical contributions. The award includes $37,200, the largest amount awarded to any individual in the NASA's history. In 1999, she received the Outstanding Alumni Award from Earlham College. On 28 April 2017, she received the Computer History Museum Fellow Award that honors exceptional men and women whose ideas have changed the world. In 2017, a Women of NASA Lego set went on sale featuring, among other things, mini figurines of Margaret Hamilton, Mae Jemison, Sally Ride, and Nancy Gray Roman. Margaret Hamilton's contributions have played an important role in getting humans to the moon, in giving legitimacy to software engineering, in giving importance to software reality, and in helping to open the door for more women to enter the computing field. Thanks, Margaret, for all the contributions.
Doctors, cobriu-vos. Anem a investir solemnement la senyora Margaret Hamilton com a doctora honoris causa per la nostra universitat. On behalf of the Faculty of the Universitat Politècnica de Catalunya, in recognition of your outstanding achievements, I grant you an honorary doctorate. By the authority vested in me, I present you with this diploma. I also present you with this biretta, a revered emblem of the highest academic level. Wear it proudly as a symbol of your achievements. Receive the ring traditionally bestowed in this ancient ceremony as an emblem of the privilege of singing and sealing reports, consultations, and criticism, corresponding to our science and profession. Also, receive these white gloves, which signify that your hands must remain pure, and like the ring, are a symbol of your dignity. Henceforth, you shall form part of our university faculty. Please receive a fraternal embrace from those who are honored to call you a colleague. Thank you. You can see you are a star. Now, Ms. Margaret Hamilton has the floor. Please proceed to your speech.
Up here? It's okay now. Okay. Well, first, I would like to thank UPC for this great honor. It means a lot to me. My background has been anything but traditional. In fact, I began in my field before it was a field. My education consisted of seemingly unrelated life and work experiences, studies in math and philosophy, and working in the trenches doing things never done before. It probably began when I was a very young child and I had what if, why, and why not talks with my father and grandfather, who taught me to observe and question everything until answers made sense. This was followed by unique challenges and experiences in the workplace, beginning when I was a young teenager. At 15, I was hired by the owner of an abandoned copper mine that had been converted into a storage place for bananas in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan's copper country. He wanted to turn it into a tourist business and take people on tours where they would learn how native copper was mined. It was the only place in the world with native copper. He had no schooling after 4th grade, and he did not know the basics like math needed to build and run a business. So he asked me to be the first tour guide and to hire and train others to work for me as guides. I also started and managed the mine's gift shop, but I was responsible for the financials in the business at large. The business grew overnight. We went from giving tours to 2 people a day to thousands of people a day. The business, with these experiences, I learned if you made a mistake, it's best not to make it again. And I look forward to more new worlds untraveled. In 1959, Edward Lorenz, a professor at MIT, introduced me to computers, where I developed weather prediction applications in hexadecimal and binary on the LGP30. Known for the chaos theory, he was the most humble human being. His love for software experimentation was contagious, and I caught the bug. Understanding the relationships between the hardware and the software was critical for developing performance-optimized software needed on the project. Errors were a nuisance since debug sessions took forever. In another early project, Sage, I developed applications in assembly language on the first AN FSQ7 called the XD1 at MIT's Lincoln Labs to look for enemy airplanes. The machine was huge, the largest computer system ever built. It was especially important not to make an error because if you did, the computer would tell on you with siren-like and foghorn-like sounds that everyone could hear and flashing lights that everyone could see. Operators and programmers would come running to find out whose program crashed. One time in the middle of the night, I received a frantic phone call at home from one of the computer operators to tell me there was something terribly wrong. When I asked him what happened, he said, "Your program no longer sounds like a seashore." We had found a new way to debug using sound. Again, tools did not exist for finding an error or what caused it. Not only was an error considered a nuisance, worse yet, it was an embarrassment. During this time, I became fascinated with errors, looking for ways to understand what made a particular error or class of errors happen, and working on ways to prevent it from happening in the future. Back then, you were on your own. Knowledge or lack of it was passed down from person to person. A manager hired you if you knew the commands in his computer's native language, like knowing a set of English words would mean you could write a novel. I was mystified by this attitude. Terms were undefined, leading to errors, misunderstandings, and drama. For example, the term software meant different things to different people. One of the managers I worked for at first thought software meant soft clothing. Although some things were quite different then, the life cycle process itself, by default, was not unlike today's traditional life cycle. Sage and the others came with their own drama, but this was only the beginning of what would come next, the Apollo onboard flight software project at MIT under contract to NASA. The challenge was that the software was man-rated, meaning astronauts' lives were at stake. It had to work, and it had to work the first time. Not only did it have to be unreliable, the software would need to be able to detect an error and recover from it in real time. We learned by doing and being. Hardware engineers came with formal rules. We didn't. Problems had to be solved, never solved before. At times, we made it up. We were young and fearless, yet dedication and commitment were given. Managers, mostly from hardware backgrounds for whom software was a mystery, gave us total freedom and trust. There was no time to be a beginner. I began by building software for the unmanned missions, concentrating in the areas of the system software, areas that were used by and impacting all the software. The system software included the error detection and recovery programs, and it was synchronous. Manned missions were next. I was now in charge of the team that developed the onboard flight software for the manned missions and the onboard flight software itself. The software was more complex for the manned missions. Our environment was asynchronous, where higher priority jobs interrupt lower priority jobs. It was up to us developers to manually assign a unique priority to every process in the flight software to ensure that all events would take place in the correct order and at the right time. I was always searching for new ways to prepare for and recover from the unexpected, ranging from program-specific to system-wide protection. I began to think about all the possible what-ifs and worked in ways to address them. I asked, what if there was an emergency during flight and we wanted to warn the astronauts? I thought there had to be a way to solve this, and there was. Each mission was exciting, but Apollo 11 was special. We had never landed on the moon before. Everything was going perfectly until something totally unexpected happened. Just as the astronauts were about to land on the moon, the flight software became overtaxed. The software's priority displays of 1201 and 1202 alarms interrupted the astronauts' normal displays to warn them there was an emergency, allowing NASA's mission control to understand what was happening and alerting the astronauts to place the rendezvous radar switch back in the right position. It quickly became clear the software was not only informing everyone there was a hardware-related problem, but it was also compensating for it. The priority displays gave the astronauts a go, no-go decision, to land or not to land. With only minutes to spare, the decision was made to go for the landing. And the rest is history. And I know you've heard this earlier today, but I'll just repeat it because it's very memorable. The Apollo 11's crew became the first humans to walk on the moon, and our software became the first software to run on the moon. The software error detection and recovery mechanisms had taken control. System-wide restarts were triggered by the computers being overloaded, keeping only the highest priority jobs, jobs whose priorities had been previously determined by us developers and manually assigned by us in the flight software. At this very moment, I remembered the most exciting discovery related to it, when the realization came to me that the steps earlier taken within the multi-programming environment could become the basis for solutions within a multi-processing environment. With this as a backdrop, the priority displays were able to be created, changing the interface between the flight software and the astronauts from synchronous to asynchronous, the hardware and astronauts becoming parallel processes within a system of systems. This would not have been possible without an integrated system of systems and teams approach and contributions made by other groups to support this becoming a reality. The hardware team at MIT changed their hardware, and the mission planning team in Houston changed their astronaut procedures, both working closely with us to accommodate the priority displays for both the command module and the lunar module for any kind of emergency and throughout any mission. Mission control was well prepared to know what to do if and when the priority displays interrupted the astronauts. I thought of the years of preparing for this day. For me, the software experience itself, designing it, developing it, evolving it, watching it perform, and learning from it for future systems was at least as exciting as the events surrounding the mission. The task at hand was to develop the CM and LEM software, including the systems software that resided within both the CM and the LEM and was shared between them, and the structure of the software, which we called glue, that defined the relationships between, among, and within mission phases. Updates were continuously being submitted from hundreds of people over time, and the many releases for each and every mission, where the software for one mission was being worked on concurrently with the software for other missions. We had to make sure everything would play together, that the software parts would successfully interface to and work together with each other as well as with other systems, including the hardware and the missionware. As developers, we were given the opportunity of a lifetime to make every kind of error humanly possible. We were handicapped by the computer's time and space constraints, giving software experts the license to be creative, resulting in very tricky programming. Requirements were thrown over the wall by non-software experts who assume that all the software programs would somehow magically interface together. Fortunately, this was not the case, for if it had been, we would never have learned what was to come next. Further, because of the computer's constraints and because of the asynchronous environment, responsibilities and data storage locations were shared among and within programs where lower priority processes were continuously being interrupted by higher priority processes during each and every mission phase. Although there were more than enough opportunities to make errors, there were now the opportunities to come up with solutions to prevent them. We evolved software engineering rules with each relevant discovery, while top management at NASA went from giving us complete freedom to complete overkill. Even though there was no lack of opportunity to make an error, and just about any kind of error possible, No onboard flight software errors were ever known to occur during flight. Having been through these experiences, one could not help but learn from them. With initial funding from NASA and DoD, we performed an empirical study of the Apollo effort. Our analysis took on multiple dimensions, not just for space-related systems, but systems in general. We asked, what can we do better for future systems, and what should we keep doing because we're doing it right? Lessons learned from this effort continue today. For example, always ask, what if? And always expect the unexpected. We also realize that systems, by their very nature, are asynchronous, distributed, and event-driven in nature, and that this should be reflected in the language to define them, characterizing their natural behavior in terms of real-time execution semantics. Once having done so, there's no longer a need to explicitly define schedules of when events occur. By simply describing interactions between objects, the schedule of events is inherently defined. We learned that the life cycle of a system is a system on its own right with its own life cycle. In fact, every system is inherently a system of systems. Most interesting were the lessons we learned from the errors found during pre-flight testing. We categorized the errors and concentrated on 3 categories. We began with interface errors, which are data, timing, and priority conflicts. They made up 75% of all the errors found. Our analysis resulted in a theory based on lessons learned from Apollo and later projects. From its axioms, we derived a set of allowable patterns for defining systems in general. This led to a universal systems language, USL, together with its automation and preventative development paradigm, development before the fact. It became clear one day that systems defined with USL behave differently than those defined with traditional languages. Of greatest interest was the realization that the root problem with traditional languages and their environments is that they support users in fixing wrong things up after the fact rather than doing things in the right way in the first place, before the fact. In contrast with a preventative paradigm, instead of looking for more ways to test for errors and continuing to test for errors late into the life cycle, the majority of errors, including all interface errors, are not allowed into a system in the first place just by the way it's defined. We continue to discover new properties in USL systems. For example, integration from systems to software is seamless, and reuse is inherent or derivable. A system defined with the language has properties in its definition that inherently support its own development before the fact. With the paradigm, the language provides input to and serves as the basis for its automation to inherit and pass on the definition's properties of control for the system's own development process. Each property in a system's definition comes along for the ride throughout its own development. The derivatives of the system's definition, for example, its software being one of them, inherit the properties of the definition from which they are derived. Each USL system has built-in reliability and built-in productivity throughout its life cycle. In contrast to the traditional paradigm, with its test-to-death philosophy, with the preventative paradigm, the more reliable the system, the higher the productivity in building it, minimizing the need for most testing. Much of the design and all the code is automatically generated by USL's automation, inheriting all the properties of the definition from which it came. Unlike a formal language that is mathematically based, but limited in scope from a practical standpoint, for example, kind or size of system, USL extends traditional mathematics with a unique concept of control, enabling it to support the definition of any kind or size of system. USL's automation, a large system, million of lines of code in its own right, is completely defined with and it generates itself. It is not magic. It is because of USL's mathematical foundation, ultimately based on lessons learned. Not only does it take its roots from Apollo and later systems, it also takes roots from other formal methods, formal linguistics, and object technologies. Evolved over several decades, it has always stood its own in several kinds of applications and environments. New to the world at large, it would be natural to make assumptions about what is possible and impossible based on its superficial resemblance to other languages, like traditional object-oriented languages. A radical departure from the traditional, it redefines what is possible. We have learned it helps to suspend any and all preconceived notions when first introduced to this language because it is a world unto itself, a different way to think about systems. When today's developers of middle to large systems are asked to list their most pressing issues, they say things like, integration is too late, if at all. Things are lacking, like traceability. Reuse is ad hoc and error-prone. Software is unreliable, even with extensive testing. It costs too much and it takes too long to make. Most people say it's impossible to do much about addressing these issues, at least in the foreseeable future. Software, by its very nature, is destined to have these problems. I ask, why do today's developers list the same issues that developers listed 50 years ago and give the same reason they gave then? True, many issues that existed in the earlier days still exist today, but does it have to be this way? We have learned from our own work that the reason for this is not the nature of software per se, but is largely because of the traditional paradigm used to build it, a paradigm that has been around since the beginning and continues in force to this day. It has been shown that many aspects of the pressing issues can be addressed, if not ultimately eliminated altogether, with the use of a preventative paradigm. Moreover, what works best for developing ultra-reliable systems just happens to work best for systems in general, no matter the application. The preventative paradigm with this language and its automation did not disappoint when put to test. In fact, we learned that the larger and the more complex the system, the better the results. What is able to be done with what has been learned, however, depends on how ready and how open developers are to a change in how we build software. Given the systems we need for today and tomorrow, I believe that change has to and will begin to happen sooner rather than later. Whatever success I may have experienced along the way, much of it was because I was in the right place at the right time, with the right opportunities and the right people. I had the benefit of beginning with no preconceived notions. Many of the things we were doing had not been done before, and for that, I feel very lucky. Much of the credit goes not only to those I have learned from, but also to the errors I have had the opportunity of having had some responsibility in their making, without which we had not been able to learn the things we did. Some with great drama and fanfare, and often with a large enough audience to not want such a thing to ever happen again. The errors showed us what to do and where to go, each holding answers to questions we had not thought of asking before. They told us how to exist without them. They led to a language with a preventative paradigm, where a system's definition inherently replaces much of what used to be aspects of that system's own life cycle and which now becomes no longer needed. The system's definition also serves as the input for the language's automation of what used to be manual processes in the system's own life cycle, and therefore results in many parts of the system's own life cycle becoming no longer needed. In essence, trailblazing and taking risk in unknown territory led us to the errors. The errors led us to a paradigm that leads before the fact to the future. Educating people how to think, do, and be in terms of the paradigm becomes the next real challenge. Thank you. Thanks. You're welcome. Thanks. You're welcome. Thank you.
Ms. Hamilton, ladies and gentlemen, I think that I speak for the whole community when I say that I am extremely honored that Margaret Hamilton is an honorary doctor of our university. I think that it's a great way to end the celebrations of the FIP's 14th anniversary. Over the last few weeks, many of us have been to see the film First Man by Daniel Chazelle, and we are proud that today we have here a real first woman, a pioneer in computing, and also a first and only lady engineer who was allowed to have lunch with the astronauts of the NASA first Apollo mission. She told us yesterday during lunchtime. She was key to mankind being able to reach the moon, to distinguish ourselves as human beings, and to help engineers to bring us new challenge and new prospects. I wish to thank the sponsor, Professor Núria Castell, the Dean of the FIP, Josep Fernández, and Professor Joan Antoni Pastor for being such good hosts, and for all their work to make this event possible and run smoothly. Special greetings are also due to the 50 young women of the Barcelona grad cohort workshop that Núria Castells has invited to Barcelona, who are relying on us in our efforts to bring talented women to the UPC. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton, for being a first and for pushing us to be more courageous in the fight to climb the ladder of success in all challenges we are facing in our lives, in our professions. Thanks again. Doctors, cobriu-vos.